I've heard that a short walk after a meal will reduce blood glucose.
Huge amount, 30-35% just taking a walk around the block after a meal.
It is indeed true that any sort of physical activity after a meal will decrease the blood glucose response to that meal. This is because the act of contracting muscles causes what is referred to as GLUT4 translocation, which is just a fancy way of saying it increases the amount of transporters to bring glucose into our muscle cells that are embedded into the membrane of our cells and able to pull glucose out of the bloodstream. This is absolutely a real phenomenon. But the question is, how important is reducing the blood glucose response to a given meal? In all honesty, we don't have any evidence to indicate that lowering the blood glucose response has much, if any, benefits. If you compare the exact same amount of dietary carbohydrates that induce either high or low glycemic responses, there's no difference in insulin sensitivity, blood lipid levels, or systolic blood pressure, given that the total carbohydrate consumption is the same, and there is essentially little difference between glycemic index and the glycemic response to a given meal, and any physiological measure or disease outcome. Therefore, it is unlikely that altering the glycemic index or using every strategy in the book to lower your postprandial glycemic response, unless you already have pre-existing prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or type 1 diabetes, has any meaningful effect on disease risk or health outcomes. That's not to say there aren't other benefits of walking after a meal, as although the evidence is slightly scant, there's a little bit of evidence to indicate that post-meal walking can be effective at relieving symptoms of abdominal bloating and improving digestion. And best of all, it needs no materials or equipment and can be easily performed by essentially all individuals. Therefore, although there might be benefits of post-meal walking, including simply just getting in more steps throughout the day, the fact that it lowers your blood glucose probably is not one of the ways in which it benefits your health. The reason it lowers your blood glucose, such as increasing the activity of your skeletal muscles and increasing your energy expenditure after that meal, might be important. But the very extreme focus on the postprandial blood glucose response and avoiding what people would refer to as a blood glucose spike doesn't appear to be a valid concern unless you have some sort of diabetes in which you have a difficult time lowering your blood glucose after a meal, or are trying to lower the amount of insulin that you need to inject.